Hello, this is a special series we're doing before the end of the year, where we'll be answering some of the most common questions you guys have asked us over the past 12 months. If this is your first time watching one of our videos, welcome. Click the subscribe button right now because we're providing massive value for the following days.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Fatima Aslam. So today we are going to see about William Blake, particularly the poem The Lamp. Actually, we have already started the Romantic era and we have finished Wordsworth. So this poet comes as a pre-Romantic poet. He's commonly acknowledged as the precursor of the Romantic period. So he's actually a forerunner of this age. Also, Robert Burns, who is famous for My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose. These two poets are considered as the forerunners of Romantic era. So far we have seen that English literature is spanning through various eras, right from medieval era with Age of Chaucer, then we have seen Renaissance, moving on to metaphysical, Milton, like that. So after each of the period, there will be a transition which is taking place, which is supporting for the upcoming age. So here, William Blake is also such a poet who is actually having many characteristics in his poetry, showing the romanticism throughout his poetry. Many elements of romanticism is present. So it's actually a revolutionary change from neoclassical age to the romantic period, a transitional period actually. So unlike the use of the lofty classical images before, here we see a shift to the rustic images, a more usage of individualism, and a novel use of language itself. So we shall start by an introduction of William Blake, because for most of the poems, it's worth to know about some of the biographical elements of the poet. So here there is not much to do about his biography, but there are some elements. So we shall start. He wanted to be an artist since childhood. Here, the thing we have to remind is that some of the poets like William Blake and the poet we have yet to discuss, that the Victorian poet Dante Gabriel Rossetti. So these poets, along with their poems, bring out the painting, which gives an illuminated vision of their poetry, which gives a vast, a wide, and an illuminated concept to their poetry. So such poets are worthy to discuss with their painting also. Here he wanted to be an artist since childhood. So his parents uh, got him to drawing school from childhood itself. And he is an excellent artist too. Most of the works which we have studied or we have discussed, like Milton's on the Nativity, William Blake has made engravings on such poems. The next point, he claimed to experience visions throughout his life. The point which we have to note here is that during his lifetime, many of the people didn't admit or didn't recognize most of his works. He was rather considered as a madman or a lunatic person, because he is claimed to experience many visions, like he has seen spirits, he has seen God by himself, like that. So he was considered as a lunatic person by the society. And his entire life, Blake earned his living through engraving. This is where I mentioned engraving or painting is much important to poets like him. He had a major of his life dedicated to engraving, and poems accompanied with it. And he had a successful marriage with Catherine Sophia Boscher. And the next point, religion was a major part of Blake's life. He was a Christian who, unlike most during his time, was very outspoken and critical of the church. Religion plays a major role in Blake's poetry. It's clearly visible in one of the poems, The Divine Image, which is there in our syllabus. So religion is a major point, but he is very critical of the corruptive nature of the church. He is a mystical man, There is a lot of mysticism present in his poetry, but still he was very much critical about the corruption and the evils taking place in English church as a clear characteristic of romantic poets. And now William Blake was a democratic poet, a spiritual visionary, and a political activist who was very outspoken about his beliefs and views on society. This I have mentioned because he had religion, especially Bible, was the most important, most keen influence for him. And he was a democratic poet. He had much commitment to society. He made remarks on the social evils, mainly on industrialization, evils of industrialization, and many like that. And despite being an imaginative genius and an artistic innovator, it is clear that Blake wants society to change. This is the point I have explained now. He wanted the society to change from evils to a world of innocence, just like the mind of a child. He was an imaginative genius. You see, romantic poets gave much importance to imagination at a very high level, where, as seen in Wordsworth, a spontaneous overflow of emotions taking place. So many characteristics like this points out that William Blake is aptly called as the precursor of romantic period. His production was a reaction against the values of the previous age of reason. The neoclassical age, or the age of reason which preceded him, was very much a satirical age with much classical images. So this kind of works, which is included as a romantic piece of work, was clearly a reaction against the values of the preceding age. His poetry consistently embodies an attitude of rebellion against the abuse of class power and was concerned about senseless wars and the blighting effects of industrial revolution. So he clearly remarked and questioned most of the evils of the society. Now, these 2 points are most important when we are looking from examination point of view. William Blake is famous for relief etching. That is, I have mentioned it just before, illuminated printing. Most of his poetry accompanied with a picture, it is known as illuminated printing or relief etching. It's accompanied with a portrayal. So it will give a vast outlook of the poem, a direct interpretation from the poet himself. So that is a peculiar aspect of Blake's poetry. Now, he used illuminating printing for most of his well-known works, including Songs of Innocence and of Experience, The Book of Dell, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and Jerusalem. Blake is most famous for creating illuminated poetry by using this technique. And now Blake is considered a forerunner to the free love movement. It's actually a 19th century movement. As you know, Romanticism or the Romantic movement emphasized upon the individualism, a more freedom for individual from the oppression faced as an individual. So the free love movement, it called for the end of any interference in sexual matters like marriage, birth control, adultery. It was keenly upon an individual, the wishes, the opinion, the right of an individual. So he's also considered as a forerunner to that free love movement and also the romantic movement. He also inspired many of the ideals and ambitions of French and American revolutions. He had many revolutionary spirit and rebellious attitude in many of his poems. Thus, he has, of course, incorporated many of the ideals of the then famous revolutions like French Revolution and American Revolution. As you know, most of the poets might have taken inspiration from this French Revolution. Yeah. Now, these are the contributions. I have categorized it as 3: illuminated books, non-illuminated, and illustrated by Blake. The first is illuminated books. I have not included all of the works, but many of the works that he have contributed is illuminated, is accompanied with his paintings, his engravings. Non-illuminated is, of course, his poetry alone, and illustrated by Blake is actually the mere illustrations without poem. So illuminated books, Songs of Innocence and of Experience, most of the poems which we have to study, I mean all of the poems which we have to study, is from Songs of Innocence or from the Songs of Experience. Now, the Book of Dell, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. This work is important because many of his ideas, opinions about working on poetry is mentioned in this work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Visions of the Daughters of Albion, All Religions Are One, and Milton. Milton is his epic work. He was a very influential figure in his life, Milton. And non-illuminated poetical sketches, An Island in the Moon, the French Revolution. So it's clear the French Revolution was very much influential for him. And illustrated by Blake, John Milton, Mary Wollstonecraft, The Book of Job, John Bunyan, The Pilgrim's Progress, Dante, Divine Comedy. And it's when he admitted the assignment of Divine Comedy that he passed away. So he couldn't finish that. And when you see the illustrations by Blake, you'll be knowing most of the works mentioned here, Paradise Lost or The Pilgrim's Progress. So he is that much passionate about painting or illustrations. About songs of innocence and experience. This is where we are concentrating. Actually, songs of innocence and experience, both of these works are complementary. One cannot stand without the other. It presents the dualistic vision, a complementary dualistic vision of human life. It's actually a lyric anthology, but despite their apparent simplicity, they are complex poems that reveal profound political, philosophical, and religious perspectives. See, on the surface level, it might seem very simple poems. Most of Blake's poems are very easy to understand, even for children. But they have deep inner meanings embedded in it, which even one can find research material under it, like psychoanalysis or intertextuality, like that. So even if it seems simple, it has complex themes embedded in it, and it exemplifies Blake's views and critiques of the time in which he lived and illustrate his major themes and style. Blake was not alienated from his society. His poems had a direct impact on society, and he commented upon many of the evils which he found very intolerable. And his works, especially Songs of Innocence and Experience, though it's only a fragment of his major production, it clearly suggests about his major themes and style. And externally, the state of innocence represents the condition of man in the Eden before his fall. So here it comes. When we see a poem, any of the poem of Songs of Innocence, we might think it's merely about childhood, about innocence, but his poem is filled with symbolic images. This innocence itself is representative of the condition of man in the Eden before his fall. So a Christian allusion, a biblical symbolism is present there. Internally, it refers to the condition of the child who has sinned, yet know what evil is. So both are there. Both the innocence of the child and a symbolism is present. It is represented by many images like the child or the lamp. The meek side, the innocent side of the poetry is represented by images like the child or the lamp. In the world of experience, which is the world of adults, people are selfish and incapable of spontaneity. So when we are mature and adults, we pretend many things. Hypocrisy comes. So such kind of the harsh reality that we face is portrayed in the Songs of Experience. While society presents inequalities and exploitation between men, this world is represented by symbols like tiger. So the poems like the lamp, the tiger, they're complementary actually. When a question based on the poem tiger comes, definitely we can connect it with the poem the lamp. So many of the poems from Songs of Innocence and Experience are complementary to each other. We can connect. Now, specifically about the lamp. The lamp actually is from, of course, from the collection, the Songs of Innocence. As I have mentioned, the lamp is a symbol for innocence, the meekness, the tenderness, all the positive qualities that a child possesses. He's devoid of any hypocrisy, any exploitation for others. And such a wide range of imagery is used in the poem, The Lamp. Here the symbols of child, lamp, and Christ are assimilated each other. Most of his poems contains the aspects of religion also. So here also the lamp is assimilated to Christ himself. The poem begins with a child-like directness and natural world that show none of the signs of grown-ups. When you read the poem, you can clearly understand the poem is in a question-answer format. It's wondering upon the creation of the God, who has made you, who has given you such a nice clothing, like that. It's in a question format, and the second stanza deals with the answers. The lyric is counterparts to the tiger. The lamb and the tiger represents the two contrary states of human soul. So this is the deep meaning within the poem. The lamb represents innocence and humanity, whereas the tiger represents fierce force within man. You'll understand more when you come with poem The Tiger. The two contrary states of the human soul. Blake followed his own maxim that without contraries there is no progression. Every human mind bestows upon two contraries. There will be happiness, there will be sadness, there will be innocence, there will be hypocrisy. So there is no progression without contraries. His songs have simple vocabulary as that of a child, and his symbols rose, sunflower, lion, London, chimney sweeper, lamp, little girl, little boy, or beetle are few and universal in nature. So his poems presents the theme of universality. It is universal in nature. It spans throughout the life. His every lyric is a window to into the imaginative world, comprehensible to the unlearned, but forever incomprehensible to the unwise. So, though it's a simple poem, it is very much comprehensible to the unlearned. Even a child can understand the verses, but ever incomprehensible to the unwise, because it contains many deeper meanings within it, and it clearly suggests the range of imagination possessed by him, a key characteristic of the romantic poetry. This is one of the most commonly asked questions in our exams, that consider Blake as a mystic poet. As I have told you, religion is a key or a main influential factor for his poetry, and Bible serves as the most important influence for him. He is clearly a mystical poet. Blake's poetry is dense and multi-layered and expresses the wide range of emotions and thoughts that pass through his brain. Some of the most revealing verses are the symmetrical poems in the Songs of Innocence and the Songs of Experience. It is here that mysticism and madness intersect most explicitly. The Songs of Innocence are Blake's placid reflections on the liberating power of imagination, of dreams and ethereal visions. Both the complementary poems from the Songs of Innocence and the Songs of Experience presents mysticism as well as madness. The Songs of Experience clearly lay out the necessity of the human rather than the mystical, the visceral rather than the reasonable. As Blake writes in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, the tigers of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction. In one poem, he emphasizes upon innocence, God as a source of innocence, and on other poem, he presents a ferocious attitude of God himself. So it's quite mystical in nature, as well as a tint of madness is present there. In the Songs of Innocence, Blake's poem, The Divine Image, reflects upon the idealistic tones of his mysticism and what they mean for the future humanity. In this poem, Blake attributes 4 divine characteristics to both God and man: mercy, pity, peace, and love. These divine attributes of God are reflections of what God finds in man, whom he has created, rather than vice versa. So, many of his poems, especially the poem The Divine Image, clearly suggest his mysticism as a characteristic. Now, these are the previous year questions. What, according to Blake, is the function of poetry? What, according to Blake, is the function of poetry? So it's already mentioned. For Blake, it's not only a source of imagination, but also he used poetry as a medium to comment upon the social evils. It's clearly visible in poems like Chimney Sweeper, where evils of industrialization is present in the poem London. Many poems like that. And also, it's also a representative of the power of imagination of Blake. Bring out the elements of mysticism, which we have discussed recently. For William Blake, childhood is both itself a symbol of a state of soul which may exist in maturity. Comment on Sir Maurice Bora's criticism in the light of your reading of Blake. Sir Maurice Bora actually wrote a work on the romantic imagination. So, in this question, all the characteristics which we find in Blake as elements of romanticism is applicable, because it's another form how Blake can be called as a precursor of the romantic era or the romantic movement. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening to me. Please bear with the shortcomings. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.